Court calls cause number 23-01-28129-CB in the interest of Jasmine Bushman in the 454th Judicial District Court of Medina County, Texas. Disregard that. Court is broadcasting by YouTube and Zoom from Kendall County Courthouse. Are there any objections?
No objection.
No objection.
No objection.
With that, can I get announcements from the parties, beginning with the department?
Kelly Price for the department, along with representatives from Belong. We are ready to proceed. And then Christy and Ona, if you could announce yourselves.
Christy Knott, Permanency Supervisor with Belong.
Ona Powell, Permanency Specialist with Belong.
Kathleen Savage, attorney for the respondent mother, Tracy Bushman. We are ready. Ms. Bushman, if you can unmute and announce your name for the record.
Tracy Bushman.
Alana Pierso, attorney for the father, Corey Martin, who is present, and we are ready. Corey, please unmute and hold up your name.
Jennifer Harris, attorney ad litem for the children. I'm ready.
Jill Roden, Tri-County CASA.
Jill. Anna Swallow, attorney for the interveners, Tristan and Emily Ford. We're ready. Mr. and Mrs. Ford, if you could unmute and state your names, please.
I didn't hear anything. I don't know if their audio's working.
Yours now?
Yes.
Yes.
Tristan Ford.
Emily Ford. Thank you.
Mr. Martin, can you please announce?
Corey Martin.
All right, can you turn on your video, please?
I will try to.
Anybody else that needs to announce while he's trying to do that? No. Okay. Anyone who's not an attorney?
I'm a courtesy worker out of San Angelo.
Go ahead and say that again. I think I interrupted you.
Misty Martinez, the courtesy worker with the department out of San Angelo.
And Matthew Schaefer, previous family-based worker and removing worker.
Shelli Nix, previous Belong Permanency Specialist for Ms. Bushman.
Your Honor, could you request that Mr. Martin mute again? It's I'm having trouble hearing everyone.
I'm going to get him to mute just well, Mr. Martin, go ahead and unmute because I need to swear everybody in first. And then I'll have everybody mute that doesn't need to be on. Is there anybody else that needs to announce?
Judge, I have several witnesses present. I don't know if you want them all to announce.
Are they going to be? Did we invoke the rule last time? Yes, we did. Okay, let's go ahead and have them announced now because they're going to be removed from the courtroom.
Thank you. Ms. Rios, could you unmute and announce, please?
Hi, Rosemarie Rios for United States Drug Testing Laboratories.
Thank you. And then there's also Marissa. I don't see you anymore.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Marissa Baldwin, a speech language pathologist providing service to the children.
And I believe that's it, Judge, for me, besides my clients that I'll be calling and the other individuals have already announced.
And Your Honor, for us, I have Melissa Potts and then Chelsea Ashton. And those might be the only two additional ones that haven't announced.
I'm Chelsea Ashton. I'm the clinical director at the Journey Recovery Center.
Thank you.
CCP Program Director at the Alcohol Drug Awareness Center of the Concho Valley.
Anyone who's not an attorney or will be giving testimony, please raise your right hand. That means all the witnesses, both the parents. Mr. Martin, raise your right hand, please. Do each of you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
If everyone could go ahead and mute now, who's not an attorney. Ms. Swallow, you said that you wanted to continue your examination of Ms. Bushman, correct?
Yes, Judge. You had just gotten to me for redirect.
Right. Okay. So we need to remove Miss Ashton to the waiting room. Miss Ferguson, correct?
Yes.
Miss Brisbane, or no?
She is, no, Judge, she's with Divinity for my
Right.
clients.
Okay, I just didn't know if she was going to be called.
Okay. I don't
Okay.
think so.
Miss Potts.
Actually, Your Honor, I might call Miss Brisbane. So if we can put her in the waiting room.
Okay. Miss Rios. Miss
Yes,
Baldwin.
Judge.
Miss Martinez, or she? I think
Yes,
she's
Your Honor.
subject to the rule.
That's the courtesy worker. I believe she is too.
Okay. Miss Nix.
Yes, Judge, and Mr. Schaefer.
Anyone else?
Your Honor, I believe that Miss Jenny Ferguson, I don't see her on. I thought she had been on. If she does hop on, she is a worker assistant who supervised the last visit, and so I will be calling her. I believe Miss Knopp was arranging for her to get on.
Okay. Back on the 3rd of June, I had called, Miss Swallow had called her out of turn. So
correct. I would be
She
asking
is-
to recall her if she comes on. And I do not plan to call Miss Knopp if others are not planning to call her. If she could remain in the room, that would be my request.
Anyone else planning to call Miss Knopp?
No, Judge. Miss Ferguson was here. You put her in the waiting room.
Okay. Well,
No as to Ms. Knopp.
okay. Wait, what did you say, Miss Pearsall?
I don't plan to call her.
Okay. Then we should be good to proceed at this point, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
All right, I'm sending a message to the waiting room participants to make sure they understand they're still subject to the rule. It's gonna take me a second to do that. Okay. All right, Miss Swallow, you may proceed with your redirected, Miss Bushman.
Thank you, Judge. Miss Bushman, can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And you understand that I represent Mr. and Mrs. Ford, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Miss Bushman, can you tell me what medications these children are currently taking?
I do not know what medication is on.
Okay. And can you tell me what date you completed rehab?
April 5th,
Of what year?
2023.
And what is your sobriety date?
February 7th, 2023.
And have you alerted the San Angelo housing that to update your lease that your Jasmine and Jameson are not living with you?
I have tried to get a hold of them. I haven't been able to get a hold of them. I've left them multiple messages and emailed them. I haven't been able to get a hold of them now.
Okay. Is there a reason why you did not alert the housing authority
I
in
never
December?
told them that.
Ms. Bushman, let me finish talking, please. Is there a reason why you did not alert the housing authority in December 2023 when the children were removed from you, that the children would not be living with you if you were accepted into housing?
When I got my extension, I told them that the kids were not with me, that I was trying to get them back.
Okay, and how did you tell them that? In what form?
In person at the office when I was getting my extension.
Who did you speak with?
The case worker that I had at the time, I don't remember her name.
Okay, okay, that's fine. Ms. Bushman, were you living with Mr. Martin at the time that the children were removed in January 2023?
Yes,
Do you believe he was aware of this case?
yes.
Okay, do you have any understanding as to why he did not make himself available?
He was working all the time.
Okay. When you had the children in a monitored return from October 2023 to December 2023, you took Jameson for a swallow study, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you take Jasmine too?
She had an appointment scheduled, but didn't make it to that appointment because they were moved before the appointment.
So yes or no, did you take Jasmine too?
No.
And the swallow study for Jameson, is it your understanding that the doctor told you to take him off the thickener based on that swallow study?
He was already off the thickener before the swallow study. The doctor, his primary doctor, told me that I could take him off the thickener.
Okay, so the primary doctor where you were taking the children when they were in your care, your testimony is that doctor advised you to take both the children off of the thickener.
She told me if they could drink water, that they could drink regular formula, that they shouldn't. And then so we were following up with the swallow study to make sure that everything was all right. That, and if they needed to have, thickening look good, then we'd redo that then.
I don't understand what you're saying, but that's okay. Miss Bushman, do you understand that your children are silent aspirators?
Yes.
Do you understand what that means?
Yes.
Okay. What does that mean to you?
That they are inhaling their liquids instead of swallowing it all the way down.
Do you understand why the children need to be on thickener?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you understand why the children needed to be on thickener at the time that they were in your care from October 2023 to December 2023? It's a yes or no question.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you understood then, but you still chose to take them off of thickener.
The doctor told me that I could take them off the thickener.
Okay. Ms. Bushman, I'm going to show you, Judge, am I able to screen share?
You are now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me see. I'm going to show you an exhibit. This is your exhibit that your attorney admitted into evidence. It's exhibit number 3. I'm going to scroll down a bit. And I think, can you read the date of this appointment?
It just says April 24th, therapy notes. That's all it says on my end.
Okay, so you don't see me highlighting date of appointment there?
No, ma'am.
What we see right now is the file explorer box with the name of the file, exhibit 3, April 24th therapy notes.
Okay, it
If
is.
you have exploded it out, we don't see the exploded version.
Okay, get rid of this. And let me try again. This has changed a little bit.
They did an update a couple months ago. They changed everything.
Is this better?
Now we can see it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Bushman, can you read the date of this appointment?
4/11/24.
Okay, and I'm going to scroll back up so you can see that this exhibit are therapy notes from your therapist, Ms. Boone, correct?
Right, yes.
Okay. Let me go back down to this. As part of your therapy, did you discuss the children's medical conditions?
Yes.
Okay. And can you read what is in quotes here?
They say they have chronic lung disease, but they don't have any breathing problems. They're not sick kids, but you can't tell. At first, they sounded congested and had breathing treatments.
Okay. And Ms. Bushman, is that something that you told Ms. Boone?
Yes.
Okay. Do you still believe that to be true?
I believe that their issues aren't as serious as everybody's trying to make them out to be. But I mean, I do understand the seriousness of them, but
Okay,
they really don't have.
non-responsive. It was a yes or no question.
Sustained.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bushman. I pass the witness.
I guess we would go to Miss Harris at this point. Miss Harris? I think she's frozen. Oh, there she is. You're muted.
I'm sorry, Judge. I'm trying to get more stable internet. Is it my redirect?
I believe so, unless I'm incorrect.
This is redirect.
I don't have any questions at this time.
So, okay, so she didn't have any cross. Okay, so then Miss Savage, do you have any recross?
Yes, Ms. Bushman, you were giving us your opinion or your stance on your children's medical diagnosis. Can you let the court know what your position is with your kid's diagnosis?
My position is, I haven't seen them sick, so I guess I don't really believe that they're as sick as everything's been put on. I mean, I haven't been able to go to the doctor's appointments. I haven't been able to, even when the doctor's appointments are set up, I haven't gotten information on when the doctor's appointments are, so I haven't been able to go to the doctor's appointments.
I'm going to object to non-responsive, Judge.
I'll ask another question. Ms. Bushman, have you asked the caseworker to be informed of the children's medical appointments?
Yes, ma'am. And every time that I do get information on when the doctor's appointment is, it either gets canceled or there's some other reason why, I can't go. But
okay. And if the judge were to grant the transitional monitored return, would you be able and willing to give the children the medication as they have been prescribed?
Of course, yes.
Okay. And as you testified earlier, you didn't take the thickener off just on your own accord. That was under the advice of a doctor?
Yes, ma'am.
And you had taken the children, or you had at least taken Jameson to get another swallow study while he was placed with you for those 3 months. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you were, you had set up an appointment for Jasmine to have one, but the kids were removed before she was able to attend. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you had gotten Jameson started in speech therapy when he was placed with you. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you had taken the children to see their primary care doctor multiple times during the 3 months they were placed with you. Is that correct?
Judge, I'm going to object as cumulative and asked and answered. We've gone through all this testimony previously.
Sustained.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Miss Price, I'm sorry I skipped you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Bushman, Ms. Swallow had asked you about reaching out to the housing to report your living status. Is there a reason why you were having to do that like right now, like more recently?
Yeah, because somebody reported me that the kids weren't staying with me.
And was it your understanding that housing was already aware of that fact?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know that somebody reported that to them?
They sent me a letter in the mail saying that somebody reported me that
Judge,
the kids
I'm
weren't
objecting
staying
to
with me.
hearsay and speculation.
Your Honor, Ms. Swallow opened the door, and this is not for the truth of the matter asserted, but to explain Ms. Bushman's recent actions for why she had to reach out to housing.
And I would also urge that
one
it's not
at a time. One at a time, because neither me nor the reporter can take all this in. Ms. Price, what's your response?
It's not for the proof of, it's not offered for the truth of the matter asserted. Sorry, I can't speak this morning. Because it's not about whether someone actually reported her or not. It's actually to look at Miss Bushman's actions, which Miss Swallow had already asked her about.
Okay, in that case, I'll overrule the hearsay objection, but be careful with any answer that might be speculative. I think she had a speculation objection as well. So go ahead and ask your question again, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Bushman, I had asked how you knew that someone had reported your living status to the housing authority. And I believe you were saying that you received a letter.
No, I received a letter in the mail saying that somebody had reported that the children weren't living with me.
And you said that during the time when the extension was granted, that you had made that fact known to the housing authority at that time?
Yes, ma'am. They had asked me how long I thought that the kids how long it would be before I got the kids back. And I told them that my caseworker had told me that it would be probably a couple of months, but now it's been like 7 months. So, but I did tell them that the kids were not staying with me, that I was trying to get them back.
Okay. And do you, not asking you to speculate, if you know, do you know who reported you?
I do not know.
Okay.
I have an idea, but I don't know.
No, I'm not asking for the speculation. Ms. Bushman, if the judge transitions the children to you, will you be asking Belong for all of the information regarding their medication?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have any objections to when you get them scheduled and situated with medical personnel there in San Angelo that you could request that their records be sent over so that their new doctors can know all of their history?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, I'll pass the witness at this time.
Ms. Pearsall?
Thank you, Honor. You would like today for Mr. Martin to continue to keep his parental rights so he's able to pay child support to you, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Are you seeking any other relief as far as Mr. Martin?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Is there anything else you would like the court to order as far as Mr. Martin?
No, ma'am.
Okay. No other questions?
Thank you. Ms. Harris?
Ma'am, you said that you would like the judge to order Mr. Martin to pay child support. Would you like for the judge to order any kind of visitation rates for him?
Any kind of what? I'm sorry.
You're really quiet.
Yeah.
It sounds like she's underwater.
Would you like for the judge to order any visitation for him?
Not unless he goes to rehab or something like that first.
No other questions, Judge.
We've done a direct and a redirect and a cross and recross of Miss Bushman at this point in time. Anything else that we need to cover with her? Can we move on?
Judge, I would request to be able to call my next witness.
All right. Who is that?
Miss Rosemarie Rios.
Ms. Rios, if you're there, if you could please unmute and turn on your video. Thank you, ma'am. I just need to remind you that you are under oath. Ms. Swallow is going to ask you some questions, and then the other attorneys are going to have the opportunity to cross-examine you as well, okay?
Okay.
All right, we are taking all this down through a court reporter, so please make sure that you speak clearly, and if you hear one of the attorneys object, stop talking and let me handle the objection, okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, Ms. Swallow, you may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Rios, my name is Anna Swallow. I represent Mr. Emily and Tristan Ford, the interveners in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your full name for the record.
Rosemarie Rios,
And Ms. Rios, where do you currently work?
United States Drug Testing Laboratories in Des Plaines, Illinois.
And what is your occupation?
I am a forensic toxicologist, certifying department supervisor, and a CS3 scientist.
Okay. And what kind of business is the United States Drug Testing Laboratories?
We test biological samples for the presence of drugs of abuse and or by alcohol biomarkers.
And is the drug testing lab where you work, is it accredited to do that type of work?
Yes, ma'am. We have plenty or several, I should say, accreditations and certifications.
And how long have you been employed in this specific field?
As a matter of fact, today's my anniversary, 18 years.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
What are your job functions and your position?
So I'm a certified department supervisor, and what that means at the same time, I am a certified scientist level 3. And what that entails is that our department is responsible for certifying all positive and negative confirmatory results. We review all immunoassay data, including the positive controls. We're responsible for reviewing that all of our quality control, quality assessments, data, and information is following criteria. And of course, we perform testimonies, build litigation packages, business record affidavits.
And Ms. Rios, are you a member of any professional associations?
Yes, I have several memberships. The main one is MAT, which is the Midwest Association of Therapeutic and Drug Toxicology. And the other one is the Society of Forensic Toxicology.
And can you please state your educational background?
Sure, I have a bachelor's degree in science with a concentration in chemistry.
And which organizations are you a member of?
The two that I mentioned.
Okay. And Judge, I would like to offer Ms. Rios as an expert in the field of forensic toxicology at this time.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Rios, I'm going to ask you specifically about a drug test, and I'm going to pull it up here quickly.
While you're doing that, just for the purpose of the record, court heard no objection. Ms. Rios has been designated as an expert.
My computer is kind of freezing. I don't want that. Let's see. Ms. Rios, what does your screen show?
It shows your quick access, nail tests, all the actual folders that you have in your computer.
Okay.
I don't think you want to be showing me this.
No. Let me try again. This is frustrating. I'm sorry, Judge.
It's okay. The world we live in.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's changed a little bit. All right, y'all bear with me, please. Let me try again. Does it keep doing that? Here we go. Open. Okay. What about now?
You're good.
Exhibit 18.
Okay. Thank you. This is Intervenors Exhibit 18. It's already been admitted into evidence. And could you read what I've highlighted here?
My laboratory, which is the United States Drug Testing Labs.
Okay. And what does that indicate to you?
That the testing was performed at our location.
Okay. And how does your location identify certain samples?
Well, each sample is received with the chain of custody, also known as a requisition form, and on the requisition form and or chain of custody, it has to have the name of the facility that actually did the collection, that sent us the actual testing, the name of the individual, meaning the donor, the name and of course of ours, the actual company sending it. Usually it's social security ID, or it could be the medical review officer's assigned number. The chain of custody number is also used for identification. So we have several identification markers that we use that has to follow that sample.
Okay. And who was the donor in this specific test result?
So Tracy Bushman is the donor.
Okay. And what was the date the specimen was collected?
It was collected. Your form looks different than mine, so I have to look around. Date specimen collected was February 27, 2024.
Okay. And what type of specimen was this?
This was nails, and to be exact, fingernails.
Okay. And how do you know if it was fingernails or toenails?
That is one of the actual markers that are on the requisition form. It has to actually stipulate if it came from the fingers or if it came from the toes, because the toenails have a longer cutoff window than the fingernails. So we need to make sure that the time that we're telling you that we can specify that the individual was positive and or negative has to be noted.
Okay. And so if this specimen was fingernails and it's collected February 27th, 2024, and your expert opinion, how far back in time is that window?
So because it's fingernails, it's 4 to 6 months. Now that's approximate. That's why we give you 4 to 6 month window.
Okay. And I'm going to scroll down a bit. And could you read to me what your interpretation is of the test results?
So we performed a 5-panel nail stat drug test. And what that means is we performed it to look into 5 different drug classes. Drug class would be the amphetamine drug class, the cocaine drug class, the marijuana drug class, the opiates drug class, and the PCP. During the testing that we performed, we determined that the individual's test was positive for the amphetamine drug class, and that it was positive for the methamphetamine.
Okay. And so what does that mean to you as an expert?
So because it was only tested positive for the methamphetamine, not the metabolite, it tells us that it was environmental exposure.
And could you explain to the court what that means?
Sure. So when an individual ingests actual methamphetamine, which is the actual drug, when they ingest it, the drug goes into the system, and of course, just like everything else, it gets metabolized through the blood, the liver, whatever it is, depending on what the drug is. And what comes out is the metabolite. So the metabolite in this case for methamphetamine would be amphetamine. Now, because the amphetamine is not present in the actual test sample, that tells me that it was not ingested. Now, because we only find methamphetamine, which is the actual drug, that tells us that the individual may have been in an environment where they were exposed to the drug.
And based off of your testimony, that would have been 4 to 6 months prior to February 27th, 2024.
Not prior to, but in that window. And the window, so it could have been from month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 6. We just give you that window, sometime in that window.
Okay. So if this individual is claiming a sobriety date of February 7th, 2023, that's somewhat inconsistent in your opinion.
February 7th, 2023, this test
Your Honor, she just testified that it's not ingestion. So that would support a sober date.
Well, I'll let you clear that up on cross. I want to hear her answer to this question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
If I'm going to strike my question, I'm going to ask you another question.
Okay.
Ms. Rios, what is the cutoff for the metabolite?
So for the metabolite, our confirmation cutoff is 100.
Is it possible that this individual ingested methamphetamines However, the test was not able to detect the metabolite because it did not meet the cutoff level.
That's possible, yes. I can't say yes or no that it is. I can't say that it's possible that it was below our detection window of 100.
So we cannot completely rule out that this positive test was not a result of actual ingestion.
Correct.
As far as the environmental exposure that you're testifying to, would that be just a one-time exposure? How does that occur?
It's unlikely because we set our confirmation cutoff levels and our screen cutoff levels so that at a level that we can eliminate all the noise. And by that, I mean so that we can eliminate, like a single exposure for the individual that, let's say they went shopping or they were in a room where an individual was smoking or something, and it was just a one-time exposure. We don't want to get those lower ones because we want to remove the possibility of just an innocent exposure. So our confirmation cutoff is set at a level so that if anything that's going to be detected above our 100, it would unlikely be due to just one exposure. It would have to be consistent exposures. And I can't tell you how many would be considered consistent because one individual can say, well, they could be in a room where it was like 100 people smoking methamphetamine, and the concentration was so strong that it triggered a one-time exposure. Or it could be several times over amount of time that it was actually exposed. So highly unlikely, or I should just plainly say unlikely, that one exposure would trigger a positive result.
Okay. And the exposure, what types of exposure? I've heard you say smoked. What other types of exposure would explain this positive test?
So the other ways that we would actually determine would probably if the individual was in a room. So you remember, if anything is in the air and the individual touches some contaminated surface, and then it can get soaked into their fingernails through the actual skin around the fingernails. So if it's being manufactured in a room, if it's being distributed in the room, if it's being smoked in a room, that can cause environmental exposure.
Okay. If someone says that they had moved furniture, would that furniture that was in an environment with where methamphetamines were smoked or used or manufactured or handled, would that explain this positive result?
Again, it would have to be a consistent exposure, and how much would have to be on that sofa, mattress, whatever the case may be. I would assume that the concentration, and that's an assumption because of course, you have to be there and know the actual concentration by testing the actual item. But if it's consistent, and I have to make sure I keep specifying that it has to be a consistent exposure, not just a one time of carrying a sofa.
Does, when methamphetamine is on a surface, does it degrade over time?
Yes, just like all drugs, the air can cause it to degrade. Sure.
Okay. So what is it that this test indicates to you?
The only thing that I can specify to this test that the individual was positive for environmental exposure to methamphetamine.
Okay. And that is it reasonable to conclude that she was somewhere she was not supposed to be?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation.
I share that objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. Let's reword that one, Ms. Swallow.
That's okay. I pass the witness.
All right, Ms. Price.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Rios, or is it Dr. Rios?
Just Ms. Rios.
Ms. Rios. Can a person be have environmental exposure repeatedly and not know it? Is that possible?
That's another assumption. I would assume yes, if it has no odor and they don't see any smoke or. So you're asking a big assumption question.
Well, and I guess let me maybe make it a little bit more. So if somebody had environmental exposure from a surface, could there be repeated exposure and the person not know that it was on the surface, that they were being repeatedly exposed to it?
I can only assume so. Yes, that can possibly happen.
Okay. And if the donor in this particular case, if they have been regularly submitting to drug test since that positive result through both hair and urine analysis, and those have all been negative, would that support a conclusion that there has been no environmental exposure since that window that you discussed earlier?
No, that is not at all true. You have to remember that all matrices have their own window, their own detection time, their own cutoffs. There's too many variables. One thing that we have to specify that one test, even if it's from the same fingernails, the same hand, different fingers, one test, one collection does not refute the results of another collection. So they all stand on their own merits because there's so many different variables that can go on: the cutoffs, the detection time, the matrix. I mean, you're comparing a urine test to a hair where urine is only 2 or 3 days exposure. You're comparing fingernails to hair where hair is only a 3-month exposure. So, and then the nails are 4 to 6 months. So when that hair was it collected during the first 3 months of the nail or after? You know what I'm saying? Was it collected from what part of the head? Every part of the head has a different concentration. You know, the vertex has one concentration here, the back of the, so it's like, no, we can't answer that. They're totally different detection times and windows.
Okay. And so if nevertheless, the person who, the donor in this case, if every subsequent drug test since the positive one that you were just looking at had been negative, the most that this can tell us is that there was environmental exposure in that window. We don't have any other evidence to the contrary with all subsequent negative tests.
No, all we can tell you is in the time frame of the collection of said sample, meaning this one is a fingernail from February 27th, that 6 months prior, 4 to 6 months, I'm sorry, 4 to 6 months prior to that collection, the individual was exposed to methamphetamine.
And in the environment?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Ms. Savage.
Yes, Ms. Rios. So if a hair test taken on or about that same time as the nail test was negative, would that support possibly that the exposure in the fingernails was based off surface and not necessarily smoke?
No, because they both have the same consideration for environmental exposure. If you're comparing two different collections. Again, one does not refute the results of another, nor does it cooperate with the other one. So they stand alone. So hairs are 3 months. And also environmental exposure, the same rules obtained, that we get the environmental exposure to nails also pertains to the hair. Environmental exposure can be all those different things. Again, let's say the individual is touching a surface and then they touch their hair, it transfers to their hair. So it's going to get absorbed and it's going to get bathed and soaked into the hair follicles. Same thing with the fingernails. If the individual's in an environment where, as you say, touch the surface, it's going to soak into the nails because it's going to be on the hands. And as we all know that we have sweat and oil on our hands, that sweat and oil, if it contains any drug and or drug metabolite, because individual can also get the drug and drug metabolite if they touch another individual or another individual that's actually positive for methamphetamine and actual amphetamine, they can transfer it to the other individual. So it can be transferred person to person. But all we can tell you is that it's environmental exposure. How the environment exposed the individual would have to be determined by the court system. We can't tell you because we weren't there.
Perfect. So as you were testifying, being around somebody could possibly be transferred based off of that person's clothing or anything that they might be wearing if they're actively using.
No, not their clothing. No, I said the hands, the sweat.
Okay, the hands.
Yes, ma'am.
So if they like shook hands and introduced each other, maybe at like an AANA meeting?
No, not just by simply that you're talking about one-time exposure, and that exposure better have some really good concentration to detect or cause a reaction above our cutoff. Again, like I told Anna, it would have to be consistent exposure. And by shaking hands, one-time individual, no, we're talking about usually when it comes to environmental exposure from one individual to the other, that's compared to or used in the situation when it's a child. You know how children are held by their caregiver, parent, whoever it is. And if they are actual drug users and they're positive for the drug, and they would have to have the metabolite as well, that would be considered environmental exposure or incidental exposure, whatever you want to call it, because it got transferred to the child from hugging and caring for. So that would be considered consistent exposure.
Okay, so like if the donor in this case was living in a sober living home and was sharing close residences with other, addicts in recovery, that could also result in her being continuously exposed to someone who might have relapsed, correct?
If she's constantly being hugged and touched, that's a big leap. But yeah, I can't answer that. They would have not just living in an environment. No, you can't get it just by me and you being in the same room. It's not like germs being transferred in the air or anything like that. We're talking about actual contact, consistent touch by the hand. The skin and the oil and all that, the sweat, I'm sorry, would have to be transferred. But no, not an individual just living in an apartment, building, house, whatever the case may be.
So in your, I'll pass the witness. Oh, but actually what you can tell us definitively is that this only tells us that Tracy was exposed to somebody or some surface that had meth residue on it.
So what I can tell you from the test results, not definitively or any other kind of opinion, what I can only tell you is that according to the results, it's environmental exposure. That's all I can say. Sample is positive, and because of the concentration levels and because there's no metabolite, we can only say environmental exposure causes.
Pass witness, Your Honor.
Before you ask any questions, Ms. Pearsall, Ms. Rios, can you give the court your operational definition of environmental exposure, please?
Sure. So environmental exposure can occur if an individual is in a room where the drug is being smoked. And I'm talking about there's several drugs that are smoked. So let's say this drug is being smoked. The individual can be exposed to if they're in a room consistently. Let's make sure that we specify that. Consistently in a room where the drug is being manufactured, where the drug is being distributed, due to contamination of touching consistently touching an environmental object, or whatever the case may be. But the magic word is we have to specify that it's consistent exposure. And yes, if an individual, but this one in particular pertains to children, is constantly being carried, touched, exposed to the sweat and oil of another individual's hands. It can also transfer to the hair. It can transfer to the nails, but not to such a concentration degree as much as the hair, because as you know, the hair is more porous. So those are different ways that environmental exposure can occur.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Ms. Pearsall,
No questions.
Ms. Harris,
No questions, Judge.
any redirects?
No, Judge.
Anybody have any other questions for Ms. Rios? May this witness be excused.
Yes, thank you, Judge.
Ms. Rios, thank you for your time and your testimony today. You are free to go. And I'll
Thank you.
remove you now. Thank you. Next witness.
Judge, I would like to call Marissa Baldwin. She is with River Kids Pediatric Home Health. She is the children's speech therapist.
Ms. Baldwin, could you unmute for me, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Swallow has called you as a witness. She's going to ask you some questions, and the other attorneys are going to have an opportunity to cross-examine you as well. If you hear any of the attorneys say the word objection, please stop talking until I can rule on the objection, okay?
Okay.
And make sure you answer loud and clear for our court reporter. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Swallow. And also, I forgot to remind you, you are still under oath.
Yes.
Ms. Baldwin, my name is Anna Swallow. I represent Emily and Tristan Ford. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you state your name for the record, please?
Marissa Baldwin.
Ms. Baldwin, how are you associated with this case?
I am a speech language pathologist providing service to the children.
And how long have you been providing services to the children?
For about a year, with a small break when they were returned to the biological mother last year.
And what type of services do you provide?
I provide feeding therapy.
And what does that mean?
So both Jasmine and Jameson have oropharyngeal dysphagia. And so they have dysfunction and disorganization of their ability to swallow food and liquid. And so my services are to try and habilitate that skill.
And what is your training, Ms. Baldwin?
I have a master's degree in speech language pathology, and I have extensive post-grad training in pediatric feeding disorders.
Okay, and you described the children's diagnoses. Could you, how are you able to conclude that that is their diagnoses?
So both children have had repeated modified barium swallow studies, and those were not completed by me, but those were completed at, I think at San Antonio Children's Hospital. And so with both of those, they swallowed under fluoroscopy. And so the clinician that did those was able to see x-ray of how they were swallowing, where food and liquid was traveling, what sort of dysfunction they observed. And so in reading those reports, I was able to see that they were aspirating. And then also my own evaluation, watching them kind of externally with how they manipulate food and liquid.
Okay, and what is the benefit of a swallow study?
So a swallow study lets you see exactly where food and liquid is going whenever it's being swallowed. With both Jasmine and Jameson, they have what's called silent aspiration. And so food and liquid will go into their airway. It's silent in that for you or I, if we were to swallow and it were to go into our airway, we would have a response where we would cough. We would have like physical symptoms. For both of them, they don't do that. And so you're not able to tell just by looking at them that food or liquid is going into their airway.
And what is the harm if food or liquid silently goes into their airway?
Pneumonia, chronic lung disease, repeated upper respiratory infections.
Okay. And are you aware if these children have any of those, have had diagnosed with chronic lung disease, have repeated respiratory issues or anything of the like?
Yes, both. I know that I believe they're both diagnosed with chronic lung disease, and they have had repeated upper respiratory infections.
Okay. And how often do these swallow studies need to be completed?
It can depend on the child, typically every 6 months, unless there are clinical concerns that one needs to be done sooner.
Okay. Specifically, talking about Jameson, is he currently on thickener?
Yes.
And why would he need to be on thickener?
So when you have a thin liquid, it moves more quickly. And so for Jameson, there is some dysfunction and some disorganization to how quickly his muscles are moving to get his airway protected when he swallows. And so by adding thickener to the liquid, you slow down. The liquid is more viscous, so it moves more slowly and gives his body more time to do what it needs to do to protect his airway.
And how do you know that the thickener is working?
Reduced upper respiratory infections.
Okay. And during the swallow study, are there events or opportunities to have the child swallow with thickener to see that they are not aspirating at that point in time?
Yes, that would typically be done during a swallow study.
Okay. And did that happen with Jameson's swallow study?
It did in the report that I read.
Okay. And so what about Jasmine? Is she under the orders for thickener at this time?
Yes.
And is it for the same reasons?
Yes.
And are they both being prescribed the same consistency for thickeners at this time?
At this time, yes.
And remind me how often you see the children?
I see them 2 times a week.
Okay. And what is the significance of 2 times a week?
So for both of them, we recently started what's called neuromuscular electrical stimulation with a device called VitalStim. And so I am placing electrodes on their throat that provide neuromuscular electrical stimulation to cause muscle contractions to both strengthen the muscles and increase the organization of those muscles. And so by doing that twice a week, there's more effectiveness for that to work. And then also the opportunity for me to monitor how they're doing, especially we're trying to reduce the amount of thickener that they're using. And so by slowly weaning the amount, I need to be in there quite frequently to make sure that they're safe with the current thickness.
And how long have you been doing this stimulation on these muscles here?
We've only been doing that for a couple of weeks. I think only 3 sessions.
Can you see a difference yet?
I can.
Okay. And what is the difference?
So again, they're both silent aspirators. So I am not always completely confident of exactly where the liquids are going, but there are some things that we can look at. One is just their respiratory rate and how quickly they're breathing. If there's increased work of breathing, that typically means that some of that liquid might be going into their airway. And then also listening to their vocal quality. So if they sound wet or congested, that's a pretty good indicator that food or liquid might be ending up in their airway.
And do you know why this condition occurs?
I don't. I mean, it can occur for various reasons. They were both premature, so sometimes that comes with prematurity. Sometimes it just comes with reduced sensation to those areas in the throat. And sometimes it can be neurological. For Jasmine and Jameson, I can't say for certain the cause of the dysphagia.
Okay. And your testimony was that you've been seeing them, except for the time period that they were with their mother, I guess, October 2023 to December 2023. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And if they did not receive any, are you aware of whether or not they received any sort of speech therapy during that time period?
If they were, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. And when did you start seeing them again?
I started seeing them, I believe, in March.
Okay. That break in care, that break in not seeing a speech therapist as yourself, in your opinion, did that have a negative effect on the children's progress?
It could have, it's hard to know, just with development, what might have been there on its own and what wouldn't have been. When I was seeing them before they were returned, we were working on weaning the amount of thickener, and they were doing really well with that. When I started seeing them again in March, we had to back to the full thickness and kind of start that process over again.
Right. And at this point, where are you at as far as the thickener goes?
We have done a 20% overall reduction.
So explain to me what you mean, 20% reduction from starting over again in March?
Correct. So I believe they were both on what's called honey thick. And so for the type of thickener they were using, it would be a certain amount of scoops per ounce of water. And so we're doing an evidence-based thickener reduction. And so with that, we're doing a 10% reduction every 2 weeks, provided there's no worsening of their condition or any illnesses, then we continue with another 10% reduction. They had a couple of ear infections and times that they were sick, and so we kind of slowed down on doing that. So at this point, we're at a 20% reduction with where we started.
Okay. At this point in time, I have a question for you in regards to the swallow study. It's Exhibit 20. It's already been admitted into evidence. And Judge, I can pull it up, or I can just read it to her.
I don't have a problem with you reading it unless somebody else wants to see it. All right, go ahead.
Ms. Baldwin, what is flash penetration?
So penetration is where food or liquid enters the airway briefly, but then is cleared. So flash penetration would be a really brief moment of food or liquid getting to the point of the vocal folds, but then backing out and not going into the airway.
Okay, so it's not an aspiration.
Correct.
Okay. However, both of these children have aspiration. I guess aspiration is a step beyond that flash penetration.
Yes.
Okay. How long do you plan on providing speech therapy to these children?
My authorization is for 6 months. At that time, if they're still requiring services, we will do a re-eval and ask for an additional 6 months. At this point, I don't see them being able to be discharged within the next couple of months. So we would be seeing at least another 9 months.
And would it be the swallow study that determines that, or you that determines that, or a combination that determines that?
A combination.
Understand? I'm sorry.
Yes, it would be a combination. Their last swallow study, I believe, was in January. And so they are coming due for time to go get another one and kind of see how we've progressed. But my recommendations will include information from the swallow study, but it would be my report that would be submitted to insurance to ask for additional treatment.
Is continuity of care important?
Yes.
And can you explain why, specifically as to these children?
Mm-hmm. So specifically when you're looking at something like silent aspiration, you want a professional in there frequently to assess if there are any changes. And if you are wanting to do a reduction of thickener, they need to be seen frequently to make sure that their bodies are handling that reduction and they're not at risk for aspiration.
So if we have a silent, these children are silent aspirators, and a doctor just does a quick medical review of the children and decides that they can be taken off thickener, in your opinion, there would need to be more of a deeper assessment than that?
Yes, thickener recommendations are typically for speech pathologists to make.
Okay. Thank you. I pass the witness.
Ms. Price.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Baldwin, my name is Kelly Price. I'm the attorney for the department. It's nice to meet you. I just have a couple of questions. As a speech pathologist, are you aware of other speech language pathology services like in other areas of the state? Like, are you a part of any professional organizations that would give you knowledge about what might be available in other parts of the state?
Not, I mean, I think it would just be like a Google search to see what's available.
Do you have any reason to, and of course you said the G word and my phone started popping up. Do you have any reason to believe that the city of San Angelo would have no speech language pathology services?
No.
Speculation, Judge. She just said she would have
Your
to.
Honor, she's an expert.
I didn't try to qualify her as expert. Number one. Number two, she just said you'd have to do a Google search.
And her opinion?
I think the question should be rephrased to stay.
Okay, Your Honor. Thank you. For a city the size of San Angelo, is there anything to suggest to you in your professional capacity that there would be no speech language pathology services available in a city of that size?
Speculation, Judge. A size of a city does not indicate whether or not there would be a speech language pathologist available. She's asking this witness to commit to something that she's already stated the individual would have to do a Google search.
Well, I think she's trying to be as specific as she can. I'm not sure how else she could get there. And I think you can clean it up for your purposes on redirect. So I'll overrule and allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So I know for my company, we have like various branches across the state. San Angelo is not one that my company serves, but it is possible that there are other speech pathologists in that area.
And Ms. Baldwin, if the children were to be returned to their biological mother over the course of a several-week transition period, looking at a 4 to 6 week period, would that be sufficient time for a referral to be made to a speech language pathologist in the area where they're living?
For a referral to be made, probably. I don't know if there would be wait lists or availability.
Right, certainly. And if they were able to be set up with services with a speech language pathologist in that area in a 4 to 6 week period, would you have any issues with making sure that new provider had all of their records and history?
Of course.
Oh, I'm sorry. So you would not have any issue with that?
Right.
Okay. Would that be a standard practice for you to send those records if they were switching providers?
Not me personally. That would be up to our medical records department, and it would need to come with a request from that new provider, or provided by the primary care physician.
Okay, perfect. And if the children were to be set up with a provider to have that transfer as seamlessly as possible, could that be done so that they are not exhibiting setbacks in their progression?
I mean, it's difficult to say that with certainty. With the way authorizations work, if they were to seek a new authorization with a different provider, Superior would require that our authorization be nullified.
And what steps could be taken to kind of make sure that that transfer could be as seamless as possible?
Well, you would need to find a provider that also is trained and qualified in neuromuscular electrical stimulation, to make sure that that could continue with a new provider. And then, like I said, that provider requesting records, and then I would also be available to discuss their case with them, with the proper paperwork signed for me to be able to discuss.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
Savage.
Ms. Baldwin, I'm gonna try to ask you to make this as simple for me. Sometimes I'm a very simple girl. So how do you help children who have swallow issues? I'm assuming it's through the thickener.
Through the thickener, and then also through oral motor intervention. So working with them on placement, on the ability to move their tongue, their lips, jaw strength, environmental setup, making sure that the food is presented in a way that's as safe as possible. And then also through things like the vital stem therapy, which is providing that external stimulation for muscle strengthening.
Okay. And so as you're providing these therapies, the idea, as you're doing now, is to reduce that thickener amount until they're able to finally be completely off.
Right. That would be the end goal.
Okay. And as you testified, your position on like where to start the thickener and what therapies to start is all based off of that initial swallow study that you receive and you review, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what recommendations would you make if you see flash penetration but no aspiration?
You would have to look at a lot of the other circumstances. A swallow study is just capturing one moment in time. And so if there's just flash penetration, but this is a kid that's high risk, that's having repeated upper respiratory infections, that's had a history of pneumonia, it's likely that aspiration is occurring, but it just wasn't captured at that moment. So you would have to look at a lot of different circumstances to make a treatment plan if you're just seeing flash penetration.
Okay. Based on that, though, would you start a thickener amount at a lower level if you're just seeing flash penetration?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware that Jameson had a swallow study in December that showed no aspiration?
Maybe in December. I know that they've had a couple, so I'm not sure which one showed flash penetration, which one showed aspiration.
Were you able to review that one in your
Yes,
development?
I've reviewed both of the ones that they've had.
Okay. And so is it common for, some medical professionals to have differing opinions on treatment plans for children and with these type of situations?
Possibly.
Okay. And so while one doctor might recommend something else, another one could recommend something very different.
There could be.
Okay. And again, that's all based on the swallow studies that doctors are reviewing in that moment in time.
Right.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Ms. Pearsall.
No questions.
Ms. Harris.
What does it mean in the future for the children if they're not receiving appropriate speech therapy?
It could mean that they're not able to get off thickener, or if they're not having thickened liquids, it could mean repeated upper respiratory infections, aspiration, pneumonia, choking.
Is this something they outgrow without treatment?
Likely not.
No further questions, Judge.
Okay. Did you have any redirect?
No, Judge.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions for Ms. Baldwin?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Judge. Thank you, Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. Appreciate your time and your testimony. You are free to go and I'll move you down. Have a good day. Next witness.
Judge, I'd like to call Matt Schaefer.
Let's bring him in and then let's take a 5-minute break. Mr. Schaefer, Ms. Swallow is going to call you as a witness next. but we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. So everybody, it's 10:26. We'll resume at 10:31. Court's in recess. All right. Ms. Hyman, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Let's go back on the record. Cause number 23-01-28129-CB. In the interest of Jasmine Bushman et al., Ms. Swallow was going to begin her direct examination of Mr. Schaefer. Mr. Schaefer, you are under oath. And Ms. Swallow, you may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Schaefer, my name is Anna Swallow. I represent Emily and Tristan Ford, interveners in this case. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
And we've worked together previously, have we not?
Yes, we have.
But we have not worked together on this case, have we?
No, we have not.
Okay. How are you employed, Mr. Schaefer?
With the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services.
And what is your title?
Senior Advanced Specialist, Family-Based Safety Specialist.
And how are you associated with this case?
I was the previous family-based worker and the removing worker.
Do you know the dates you were involved with this case?
Yes, I do, roughly.
Can you tell me?
Yes. Family-based got involved, I believe, around December 5th of 2022. And I was involved until Team C was granted on January 5th of 2023.
So approximately a month?
Roughly, yes.
And how long have you been employed by the Department of Family and Protective Services?
Going on 12 years now.
Okay. And so you're familiar with the policies and procedures and how these cases work?
Yes.
And were you the worker who ultimately conducted the removal of the children from Ms. Bushman?
Yes.
Were you, what was the main concern in this case?
The department got involved due to some concerns in regards to drug use in regards to Ms. Bushman, the allegations of drug use, and the children being exposed to prenatal drug use and also testing positive during the meconiums at birth.
Okay. So if I heard you correctly, you said their meconium was positive at birth.
Yes.
And Ms. Bushman, she was positive at the time at the hospital at their birth?
As I remember the case records from investigations, yes, I believe her urine analysis was positive.
And if the UA was positive, what does that indicate to you?
That there's some sort of current drug use occurring at the time.
Okay. And if the children's meconium was positive for methamphetamines, what does that indicate to you?
Well, no doctor, but majority of the time it means that there's been exposure to drug use over a period of time.
Okay. Have you ever had any contact with Mr. Corey Martin?
I have not.
Have you ever tried to get in contact with Mr. Martin?
Yes, I have.
How many times would you say that you attempted to get in contact with Mr. Martin?
At least 6 to 7 different times via text, phone call, voicemail, and email.
Do you believe that he was aware of this case?
I believe he was.
Why do you think he was aware of this case?
To my knowledge, I believe that, well, I do recall when I was speaking with Ms. Bushman at the time that I had the case, that she also stated that Mr. Martin was aware of the case being involved, with the department being involved with them. But unfortunately, she didn't have any sway or pull to try to get him to cooperate, but did provide me with the initial contact number to start allowing me to initiate communication.
And when you were in contact with Ms. Bushman, was she at the hospital or was she already back home?
She was already residing at the residence.
And who else was residing at that residence?
I know Miss Bushman was. I can't recall the individual's name that she was residing to, which was a friend of hers that opened the residence for her to reside there with her and her children. I do know that Miss Bushman had stated that Mr. Martin was residing there as well.
Okay. Did you ever see any evidence that Mr. Martin resided there?
I believe I saw some clothing. Other than that, there was nothing more.
Did you ever have any conversations with Miss Bushman regarding drug use with Mr. Martin?
I cannot recall fully at this time if there was.
Did you ever have any conversations with Miss Bushman regarding drug use of Mr. Martin?
Again, I can't recall if I did or didn't.
When you received the case, was there a safety plan in place?
Yes, there was.
Can you explain the goal of safety plan?
I stand corrected. No, there wasn't a form of a safety plan in place at the time. I'm the one that initiated the safety plan.
And can you explain the goal of a safety plan?
It's to ensure child safety and mitigate the risk of any safety concerns reappearing in the midst of families working with us.
Okay. Is there usually immediate danger to a child when a safety plan is put into place? And in this
Yes,
case,
ma'am.
do you recall why you initiated a safety plan?
Yes, ma'am. I initiated the safety plan due to obtaining new drug use concerns that were revealed through testing and needing and Ms. Bushman being the ultimate primary caregiver to the children at the time that the drug use was present.
So the children tested positive at birth in their meconium. Mom tested positive at birth in her UA, but the children were still returned to her from the hospital.
Yes, ma'am.
And no safety plan was in place.
No, ma'am. Not
And
that I recall.
following, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Not that I recall, ma'am.
And following the return of the children, or the children coming home to the mother from the hospital, it's your testimony, if I'm understanding correctly, that she then tested positive again?
Yes, ma'am.
And what type of test was that?
An oral mouse lab test,
And what was it positive for?
methamphetamines.
Okay. Did she make any admissions to you that she was using meth?
Yes, she did.
Do you recall how many times she admitted to you that she was using meth?
Yes. I believe 2 to 3 times in addition to the initial drug test concern
And that was-
with the, go ahead.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I was just saying is at least 2 to 3 more times after the initial drug test results were revealed from the lab test.
And that was within that 1 month time period.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever know Ms. Bushman to not be honest with you?
No, she was always honest when I confronted her, asked her about the drug use.
And so do you recall what the safety plan entailed?
Yes, that Ms. Bushman was to be supervised at all times by the supervisor that lived in the home. And again, I do not recall her name, but regardless, all contact between Ms. Bushman and the children were to be supervised at all times.
Did you ever drug test that individual that was to be the safety person?
No, there was nothing brought up as a concern, or we were never given any formal information to indicate that there was any drug use with her.
Was the living environment clean?
Yeah, for the most part. There wasn't nothing too concerning. If there was, things were addressed with Ms. Bushman on the spot.
Okay. How long was that safety plan, if you recall?
I think it was implemented up to maybe just 2 weeks until the department intervened. It wasn't very long.
What happened at the time the department intervened?
I gained knowledge that the safety plan was being broken. Ms. Bushman was not being supervised correctly or efficiently. Ms. Bushman had left the residence. The safety plan supervisor had no recollection of that occurring. Her door was shut. There was honestly no adequate supervision at all times with between Ms. Bushman and the children.
What time of day was that the mom left the twins?
To my recollection, I believe it was late in the evening, very late, maybe between 11 p.m. to 12 a.m., I believe, or 10 p.m. to 12 a.m.
And how did you become aware of that?
I followed up with Ms. Bushman during the home visit, and through discussion of hearing admittance, she admitted to leaving the home during a certain period of time to use the drug use, and stated that the safety plan person had no idea that she had left nor came back.
Did you refer mom for any services?
Yes, ma'am. She was, I believe the MTP instructed her, was ordered to engage in a drug and alcohol assessment, random drug testing, individual counseling,
Mr. Schaefer, we're only getting about every other syllable, so I'm going to give you permission to turn off your video so that we can use some of that bandwidth for your voice. And Ms. Swallow, could you please re-ask your last question so he can answer it?
Yes, Judge. Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you do the same?
Yes, you sound a lot better, actually.
Okay.
Could you please explain to the court what services the department asked mom to complete when the MTP was granted?
Yes, she was ordered to participate in a drug alcohol assessment and follow recommendations, random drug testing, and individual counseling / parenting incorporated within the individual counseling.
Okay, and are you aware if she completed the OSAR?
Yes, she did. Initially, she tried to complete it on, I believe, the middle of December, around the 15th or the 16th. But I do recall that she notified me that the phone had died and it got rescheduled to January 4th. And it wasn't until January 4th that she successfully completed her OSAR.
Do you believe that she was honest on the assessment?
She was not.
Could you
fully.
Can you explain why you're stating that?
Yes. When I went to confront or follow up on the 4th after her drug and alcohol assessment, she did admit to using the night previously, which would have been January 3rd. And she advised me that she did not make the person conducting the assessment aware of that use. So therefore, there was not complete honesty in the assessment.
Do you believe that that affects the results of the assessment?
Yes, it does. If they're not clear and precise and honest during the assessment, they can't be thoroughly assessed correctly.
Did mom ever admit to you that she used in the home when the children were there?
Yes. Not in the residence that she's residing, but did admit to using in a residence where their children were present.
Do you believe that Ms. Bushman ever minimized the use of meth and the effects it had on her children?
I would say yes.
And why do you say yes?
We had numerous conversations about the effect it can have on the case, what could happen to her children if drug use continued. We talked about some triggers and coping skills or triggers that were impacting her life that resulted to reasoning behind the use. And again, as we continue to discuss this and the severity and the importance of it, it didn't seem as if it was taken fully seriously by Ms. Bushman.
And did she ever indicate to you that she just needed to use meth to help her stay awake?
Yes, she did.
Could you explain to me that situation?
Yes, it was just, again, during a time that I was having a visit with her, and addressing some of the drug use and getting her set up in services, reasoning that she had chose that she's overly tired and she needed a boost to keep her awake to continue to care for both young children during that time that she had them, just to stay awake, and because it was a lot of stress on her.
Do you believe that Mr. Martin helped her at all during that time period with the children?
I can't say that I know for sure. I would hope that he did, but I don't have any facts to support that.
As part of your role, and also in drafting your affidavit for the actual removal of the children, did you not conduct a due diligence search in regards to Ms. Bushman's, Mr. Martin's CPS history?
Yes, I remember recalling some of the previous CPS history.
Okay, what's your understanding of Ms. Bushman's prior CPS history?
That she has had a few other children removed in the instance of substance use concerns and not being able to fully obtain them back in her custody.
Do you know why she was not able to achieve reunification in those prior cases?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know fully.
Were any of those children also Mr. Martin's?
I cannot recall if that was a true fact.
Okay. Are you aware of whether or not Ms. Bushman has a history of meth use prior to this case?
Yes, I was made aware of that.
Okay. Are you aware of whether or not Ms. Bushman has been found reason to believe for any of prior children?
Yes, I do remember seeing something about previous cases where it was validated for reason to believe, and I believe the children were placed into foster care at that time as well.
Okay, but you don't know how many children?
Not off the top of my head, ma'am.
And you don't know from what time period CPS initially got involved in her life?
If I could refer back to the affidavit, I'm pretty sure I could come up with some of the dates.
Do you have a copy of the affidavit?
Yes, I actually have that pulled up.
Judge, may he be given permission to refresh his memory off his affidavit?
Provided it's the same affidavit everybody else has, that's fine.
Yes, Your Honor, it is.
You may proceed then.
Mr. Schaefer, please let me know when you have it pulled up.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. And I'm referring to Section 5 regarding CPS history.
Yes, ma'am.
And are you able now to testify as to when the department became initially involved with Ms. Bushman?
Yes, I see that I notated on the affidavit. It was May 19th of 2005.
Okay, and what child was that involving?
I see that there's allegations of physical abuse of John Anthony Bushman.
Okay, and what ultimately happened in that case?
According to the CPS history, that it was reported that a 2-year-old had some sort of a fracture in the skull, but there's conflicting stories as to what happened, but ultimately allegations were ruled out and the case was closed at that time.
Okay. Do you know if Ms. Bushman ultimately achieved, at that time, the allegations were ruled out? Was there another case subsequently opened as to Mr. John Anthony Bushman?
Yes.
And what was that?
Yes, ma'am. It was November 9th. I'm sorry, November 9th of 2005.
And what were those allegations?
There's allegations of physical abuse of John Anthony Bushman by Mr. Ryan and Miss Bushman.
Okay. And were there other children involved in that referral? Did you hear me, Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Schaefer?
Yeah.
Sounds like we're having some more connectivity issues.
Mr. Schaefer, can you hear me?
Mr. Schaefer? Miss Kanal?
Hello, Judge. Can you hear me clearly now?
I can hear you clearly now.
All right.
Thank you. Mr. Schaefer, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay, so looking at you were discussing when the department got involved yet again with John Anthony Bushman, and that was November 9th, 2005, correct?
Yes.
And were there other children involved in that referral?
Yes, there was a Miss Kyla Ann Ryan and a Matthew Thomas Ryan.
Okay, and what were the allegations?
There was concerns of Mr. Ryan was arrested due to abusing gasoline in the home by smelling and huffing it. There was also concerns of physical abuse that were ultimately ruled out, but there was also allegations of neglectful supervision that were unable to be determined on Mr. Ryan and Ms. Bushman.
Okay, and unable to be determined, what does that mean?
It means that there's not enough sufficient evidence to support whether the allegations of abuse or neglect did occur or did not occur.
Okay. And then was the department yet involved again when it came to John Anthony Bushman?
Yes, ma'am.
When?
December 16th of 2013.
And what was the referral at that time?
Allegations of physical neglect of John Anthony Bushman by Miss Bushman.
And what was the outcome of that?
That case was, let's see here. The allegations of that physical neglect were considered to be ruled out.
Okay. And then was the department involved yet again when it came to John Anthony Bushman?
Yes, ma'am.
When?
May 13th of 2014.
And what was that referral?
Referral came for allegations of medical neglect of John Anthony Bushman by Miss Bushman. However, the case was administratively closed as the allegations were already previously investigated.
Okay. Was the department yet involved another time when it came to John Anthony Bushman?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was the referral on that?
That was a September 14th of 2016. There was allegations of neglectful supervision and physical neglect of John Anthony Bushman by James Martin, Tracy Bushman, and Corey Martin.
Okay. Was James Martin?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Was James Martin another child?
Yes.
Okay. So this referral from September 14th, 2016 was in regards to the children John Anthony Bushman and James Martin by Tracy Bushman and Corey Martin, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The same parties who are here today, Ms. Tracy Bushman and Mr. Corey Martin.
Yes, ma'am.
And what were the allegations?
About the home environment being unsanitary and safe for the children. There was also concerns of methamphetamine use in regards to Ms. Bushman and Mr. Martin, and also some marijuana use as well. The allegations were found reason to believe.
Okay. And what was the ultimate outcome of that case?
The children were removed and placed into foster care.
Okay. And so the department, and do you know what ultimately happened after they were placed into foster care?
Yes, it looks to see that Ms. Bushman and Mr. Martin did relinquish their parental rights in regards to John Anthony Bushman.
And so their parental rights were terminated.
Yes, ma'am.
And so it took the department from 2005 to 2018 to finally address the issues for Mr. John Anthony Bushman.
You kind of broke up, I'm sorry.
So it took the department from 2005 to 2018 to finally address the issues in regards to John Anthony Bushman.
Yes.
It's a total of 13 years, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware of any, as part of your job, do you also run criminal background checks on the parents?
Yes, we do.
And are you aware of any criminal history of Ms. Bushman?
Yes.
And what is that?
In accordance to my affidavit, we have a charge from June of 2011 for fraud and possession of a controlled substance prescription.
Okay. And what about for Mr. Martin?
It was August of 2000. It's driving while license invalid.
Okay. And what is the date of this affidavit?
It would have been on January 5th, 2022.
Okay. 22 or 23?
I'm sorry, January 5th of 2023. My apologies.
Okay. But you don't have an updated evaluation on their criminal history, do you?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Do you believe that the department did everything the department could at the time to try to prevent removal of these children?
Yes.
Do you have any personal knowledge of the children's current medical conditions?
No, I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer. I pass the witness.
Thank you.
Ms. Price Cross.
Yes, Your Honor, just briefly. Hi, Mr. Schaefer. Thank you for being here today. I just have a couple of questions. Are you aware of the status of either Ms. Bushman or Mr. Martin in terms of their compliance with services with Belong at this time?
No.
Do you have an opinion as to whether or not the court should grant a transitional monitored return to Ms. Bushman, or whether parental rights should be terminated at this time?
No, I have no current input nor opinion in that matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
Ms. Savage.
I'll pass, Your Honor.
Ms. Pearsall.
You have never had any contact with Mr. Martin, correct?
Can you guys hear me clearly?
No, we
did
didn't
not
hear
your
you.
answer.
Thank you. Ms. Pearsall, no, I have not had any communication with Mr. Martin.
No other questions.
Ms. Harris.
Did any of the prior allegations that you reviewed involve neglect?
Yes, they did.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Redirect.
No, Judge. Thank you.
All right, may this witness be excused?
Yes, Judge.
Is there any reason for me to put him back in the waiting room, or is he free to go?
I believe he's free to go.
Yes, Your Honor. If he may be excused, please.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer, for your time and your testimony. You are free to go. I'll remove you now. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Next witness.
I would like to call Shelli Nix, please.
Ms. Nix, if you are there, could you please unmute and turn on your video? Can you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just reminding you, you're under oath. Ms. Swallow is going to ask you some questions, and then the other attorneys will have the opportunity to cross-examine you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, Ms. Nix. My name is Anna Swallow. I represent the interveners, Mr. Tristan and Emily Ford. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And Ms. Nix, you and I have worked together for quite some time, correct?
Yes.
But we have not worked together on this case, have we?
No.
Okay. Ms. Nix, how are you employed?
I am a permanency specialist with Belong.
And how long have you been in that role?
It'll be 2 years in October.
Okay. Prior to being a permanency specialist with Belong, were you employed by the Department of Family and Protective Services?
Yes.
And how long have you been employed with the department?
That was approximately 11 years.
And were you a caseworker?
Yes.
How are you associated with this case?
When this initial removal occurred, I was assigned as the primary caseworker. That would have been in about January of 2022, I believe.
Okay, and what's your understanding of why the children came into care?
There were twins in the case, Jasmine and Jameson, born testing positive for methamphetamines, and a family-based case originated for a brief time from November until January following the formal removal, and I was assigned to be the conservatorship worker.
What are your duties as the primary caseworker on a case?
To visit the children a minimum of once a month, preferably in their placement, to maintain monthly contact with the parents in the case.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I was knocked out right after she said I was assigned as the primary caseworker. I lost connection.
All right.
Reappear.
Okay. If you could start over after the primary caseworker testimony, Ms. Nix, and I don't know if it's possible for you to get any closer to your device or maybe be a little louder. You're kind of quiet.
Okay. I can talk loud.
All right.
Okay.
Are you ready, Ms. Hyman?
Yes, I am, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Nix.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. After being assigned, I think Ms. Swallow's question was, what are my duties as a primary caseworker? I was saying that primarily it's to see the children with the expectation that that will occur a minimum of once a month, with the majority of those visits in their home, to maintain contact with the parents in the case, to develop and help them maintain their family plans of service, completing service referrals to ensure that they are able to engage in all the services required on their family plan. That may include referring to counselors for psychologicals, for substance abuse treatment. Also with the children, with not just visiting them, but maintaining contact with their caregivers to obtain information about their current well-being and health and safety, and to facilitate parent-child visits, and to just maintain the case throughout its lifetime in the court.
And how long were you the caseworker on this case, Ms. Nix?
I transferred the case probably about 6 months or so, Ms. Swallow. Looking back through my notes, I was assigned the case on January 5th. I said 2022, but it was actually 2023. And on July 14th, my supervisor and I met with Miss Powell and Miss Knopp, and we transferred the case back to Medina County.
Do you know why the case was switched?
Yes, because I do not actively work Medina County cases. I'm assigned to 4 other counties, which keeps me pretty busy. The only reason that I was assigned this case at all was because I was mentoring a new worker, and part of the requirements for having a protege is they need to be able to be assigned a new case, or as early as possible. So in July, when cases had caseloads had leveled off and I was no longer mentoring a worker from Medina County, the case transferred back to Medina County's conservatorship worker.
Did you have consistent contact with Ms. Bushman while you were the caseworker?
Yes, I did.
Did you have consistent contact with Mr. Martin while you were the caseworker?
Somewhat, with Mr. Martin, I was able to either exchange text messages with him or phone calls. We had made a couple of plans to try to meet in San Antonio, and I think those plans fell through. And I think shortly after that was when the case got transferred. So he and I only had phone contact and text messages.
Do you believe did you have the impression that Mr. Martin was ready to work services in this case?
No, not at the time that I transferred the case. I wasn't certain that he was really ready to engage in services.
Did you create a family plan of service for him?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall what was on that family plan? If you don't, I can pull it up.
Probably just because so many of them do have similar services, I would say counseling, substance abuse assessment, and the treatment recommendations from that assessment, to participate in visitation with his children, maybe a parenting class. Have I missed anything, Ms. Swallow?
Well, I can pull it up so we can make sure if you want me to.
That'd probably be a good idea. My memory's good some days and faulty other times.
Let's see. So this is going to come up and we're going to go through that same thing again. What do you see on your screen?
It says Bushman Family Plan.
Do you see Exhibit 4?
Yes.
Okay. So are you looking at Mr. Martin's family plan of service?
Actually, what I'm looking at is a list of documents. Ms.
Yeah,
Walker.
no, we don't want that. Let me get rid of this. Let me try again. Now what do you see?
Now I see a family plan.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nix. I'm going to scroll down. Let me see. When was this filed into the case?
This would have been, looks like it was e-filed February of 2023.
Okay.
That would have been an update to the plan.
Okay. And were you on the case at this time?
No, I was not.
You were not on the case on February 2023?
Oh, yes, sorry. What year is this?
We're in
February 2023. Yes, that comes up for January. Sorry.
Okay. Can you read the sentence, please?
Yes, that Mr. Martin was not available to participate in the development of his family plan of service. Group conference was not able to be facilitated. I think I can't see all of it. Caseworker developed Mr. Martin's family plan of service independently without his input.
Okay, and is that normal?
It happens. At that time, we just hadn't had any contact with Mr. Martin.
I guess I should clarify my question. Is it normal that you would create a family plan of service for a parent if they are unable to present themselves to participate?
Yes, it is, because it's required by law to have a family plan.
Okay. And I just want to go over his services because that's the question I asked you. So I'm sorry about this scrolling, everybody. This makes me a little nauseous. I don't know about everybody else. Let's see. Okay. Can you please read the danger and worry statement?
The department is worried that the allegations that Mr. Martin uses drugs and is the alleged father of the newborns puts the children's safety at risk, being exposed to drugs while living in a home where drugs are being used.
Okay. So it looks like what service is, we have a goal statement. I'm going to scroll down some more and it says parents' needs. Is this a service that you requested Mr. Martin to complete?
Yes, complete a parenting class, preferably one on early childhood development because his children were newborns at the time, and then provide a certificate of completion.
Okay, and was it your understanding that Mr. Martin and Ms. Bushman were a couple at the time you were the caseworker?
At the time that I first visited Ms. Bushman, She said Mr. Martin was not there and they were not together anymore. Over the course of the case, I think they resumed communication, but she was still somewhat vague about her intentions with Mr. Martin or his intentions with her.
So you never knew for sure?
No, they were not living together at the time that I first met Miss Bushman.
Okay. So we have parenting. The next service looks like substance abuse.
Yes, to complete a substance abuse assessment and then follow their recommendations for treatment, whether that might include inpatient or outpatient, AA meetings, getting a sponsor, and participating in random drug testing.
Did you ever have any conversations with Ms. Bushman regarding Mr. Martin's drug use or lack thereof?
To my recollection, Ms. Bushman accused Mr. Martin of using drugs.
Do you know what kind of drugs?
I'm sorry, I do not specifically recall.
Okay. You also have here coping skills and mental health. What is this service?
That he would complete a psychosocial, and that would be done with the therapist, and follow all the recommendations, including psychological, if recommended, that he would participate in therapy a minimum of twice a month to address the safety concerns that led to the removal of the children, and follow the therapist's recommendations for any additional services.
It states here, what does the sentence state?
I did write at that time, Mr. and Ms. Bushman currently live together. If their intention is to remain a couple, they need to engage in services to address the safety concerns.
Okay. And then Mr. Martin, did he sign this?
Because I never was never able to meet with him.